one more time today. My name is Gary Fowler. I'm the CEO, president, and founder of GSD, Get Shit Done Venture Studios, premier ion quantum venture studio located in the heart of Silicon Valley. I'm a 17-time serial entrepreneur with several unicorns under the belt. I was on the original management team of Click Software, which was sold to Salesforce for $1.35 billion, and also Eva.ai. Today, I'd like to welcome you each to Top Global Startups, where I controversial frontiers in sciences, consciousness, and human potential, psychedelic research. Our guest is Joel Brierre, founder and CEO of KVI, an organization dedicated to exploring the unique potential. Often described as the world's most powerful psychedelic compound, Joel and his team are working alongside leading researchers, neuroscientists, and universities around the world to better understand the psychological and transformational effects of this remarkable molecule, 5-MeO-DMT. Their work includes pioneering research efforts such as the first official EEG study of the peak experience using the psychedelic, helping bring scientific rigor to a field that has historically been misunderstood and underexplored. As interest in psychedelic medicine accelerates globally, researchers, investors, clinicians, and policymakers are asking important questions. Can these compounds help address depression, PTSD, addiction, anxiety, and trauma? What happens in the brain during profound mystical experiences? How do we balance scientific discovery, ethics, safety, and commercialization? And what does the future of consciousness technology look like? Today, we'll explore the science, the business, the opportunities, the challenges, and the vision of substances ever studied. So I'd like to bring Joel on the show. Hi, Joel.
Hey, Gary. Thanks for having me on.
Those who may not be familiar with your story, what led you to dedicate your career to studying that substance?
Yeah, so I was really into psychedelics since the 90s. Had a lot of experiences back then, and it has always kept a strong interest in my mind. I reapproached psychedelics and plant medicines in the late 2000s when I was really going through kind of the bulk of my healing. I had a pretty wild upbringing. I'm from Washington, D.C., and Washington, D.C. was a pretty wild place in the 80s and 90s. And I was no stranger to all that trouble. And so, once I was in the phase of kind of reconciling, everything that I'd been through, I was reintroduced to these medicines and experienced a huge amount of growth in a very short, compacted amount of time. And, I didn't start serving medicine until about 2013. I began serving these medicines. And, at first there was no, I would say, business interest attached here. It was a huge passion of mine, is a huge passion of mine. Years later, Michael Pollan's book came out, How to Change Your Mind with Psychedelics. And we started, I would say, receiving a very different demographic of participants coming to the retreats that we were holding, where previously it was psychonauts and kind of seekers who were attending this work. All of a sudden we started receiving people who were suffering very deeply and had read an article that said this may be able to help in some way. So this was an invitation to us to begin expanding our team, bringing on more licensed clinicians, more therapists, and more scientific researchers who understood different areas of this medicine and begin to form real protocols and real ways of working with this medicine. As Gary, as you mentioned, the compound we work with is 5-MeO-DMT, which is the strongest psychedelic in the world. And I would say a big part of our—
By strength, what do you mean? Do you have out-of-body experiences, or what happens exactly? So let's walk me through, okay, you take it and what happens to you?
So 5-MeO's nickname is the God molecule. And we could take all other psychedelics and put them into one category, and 5-MeO is going to be in its own category. And the main difference is with any other psychedelic, I take something and I go on a journey. I may see colors, I may see shapes, I may see spirits or entities, get information. But with 5-MeO, it's that sense of I that's temporarily dissolving away, AKA your famed ego death, ego dissolution. So the sense of self is temporarily shutting down, allowing the awareness to we'll say, expand beyond the confines of the individual structure, resulting in an experience that is by definition ineffable, resulting in an experience that cannot be explained at all, because the method of action of 5-MeO-DMT is quieting or shutting down temporarily the default mode network, the parts of the brain responsible for giving us an individual experience. And so when that shuts down, the experience on the other side is your classic mystical experience, where many people that experience it is merging into the infinite, merging with God, merging with etc. And so this is, can be considered a deeply profound mystical or religious experience. And neurologically, it acts very different from other psychedelics because it is bringing a temporary interruption to the architecture of the self structure. It is, we'll say, bringing in a malleable state to the brain to where very hardwired behavioral patterns and defense mechanisms can become unlearned, can be shifted, and we can replace them with completely new patterning. And so 5-MeO is like opening up a window or a doorway to the deepest parts of the psyche, where we can get decades of work done in a matter of weeks.
And so, I remember I was a psychologist, but sometimes you can have a psychotic break from taking these kind of things, right? So what happens? How do you control it so they don't get severely disturbed?
Good question. And, I would say it's less around people can get psychotic breaks from this. If a practitioner is screening intelligently, we are able to look for risks of psychosis, in the horizon. There are certain signals of people have a history of psychosis or, of mania, things like this. It's going to be an indicator. The important things with psychedelics is it's not around trying to mitigate a bad trip. Someone may have an experience that looks like a psychosis, but, they're back in less than an hour. It's more so having a container or having specialists that are well-versed enough in how the psyche works and how trauma is processed and all of this to allow a regulation of the nervous system afterwards, to allow an integration of what has just happened. And so by, I would say, rigorous screening and intake and a medically supported staff, we are able to mitigate those kind of adverse events.
What was the moment when you realized this wasn't just an interesting molecule, but potentially an entirely new frontier in human understanding?
Probably the first time I ever had, a real full experience with this medicine. This is, this experience is the most powerful experience a human being can have. It is a very potent experience. And for, I would say, almost the majority of people who have their first experience with 5-MeO, the first things they think when they come out is, if everyone in the world could do this, there would be no more war. Or if everyone I loved could do this, there would be at peace, whatever that is. And how do I better put that? I think I just lost the direction of the question on that one. I kind of started going in one direction.
So if you go down through, the key is, when was the moment when you realized this wasn't just an interesting molecule, but potentially an entirely new frontier? And then is it a personal experience, as everybody has a different experience? And two, do you have to have doctors involved in this process? Is this FDA approval kind of thing, or how does it work?
Good question. So, to the first part, when I realized that this was something huge, was really in the mid 2010s. The more I developed a relationship with this medicine and saw how it affected other people, saw that this was a game changer, saw that this was something huge. Just a few years later, 2020, 2021, started seeing headlines. A few different drug development companies were raising large amounts of capital for 5-MeO to take it through clinical trials, through the FDA process. One company did an 80 million seed round. Another company, they IPO'd out of Dublin, Ireland, and their market cap quickly went up to around $500 million, and it's over that now, I believe. But why we need doctors is 5-MeO is a very potent compound. It's a very unpredictable compound in a lot of ways. And so for our retreats, we have a doctor on site. He is not in the room of the sessions, but he is on site and there for any emergency that could arise, along with all medical equipment. And then a lot of
Have
our
you had that happen, Joel, where you've had to call the doctor in?
during our retreats, we have not. We do rent out to some colleagues that also work with 5-MeO. And we have, I think it was actually just maybe 3 months ago, they had a participant stop breathing and emergency protocols were needed. Luckily, everything was fine. And she had a very, very beautiful experience. But it's something to know that, 5-MeO DMT and ibogaine are the two psychedelics that do need at least medically informed oversight. Those are the two where things can go wrong if it's not in informed hands.
Huh, interesting. Many entrepreneurs pursue AI, fintech, or software. Why psychedelics?
To be honest, this was not an entrepreneurial endeavor at first. I am what, can be called an accidental entrepreneur, where this was just a mission at first. This was something that I knew had to be out there. 5-MeO DMT was starting to get very popular. And unfortunately, a lot of people were being harmed by their experiences because there weren't any above ground places that were trustworthy that they could go to be able to be safely served this medicine. And so I wanted to open up a full-time above ground center here in Mexico where we could legally do it. And opening up a center meant that I was going to have to do a cap raise. And that meant that I was going to have to get to learn business. Luckily, this happened right before the pandemic started. So when the pandemic hit, I was kind of put on timeout and had some time and space to really learn business, had some time and space to take on some mentors from the VC space, to take on some, serial entrepreneurs who had a few exits already and get to understand what it was going to take to actually grow this business. And so I would say it's been an adventure since then, but I would say it didn't shift to an entrepreneurial anything until around 2019, 2020. And from there, it's been a journey. It's been a journey getting to understand how to scale a company in the psychedelic space. Because as you just said, a lot of people coming in are getting into AI, they're getting into tech, into models that have, they're proven models. They have valuations that can be compared against other comparable model companies. It is just a lot different. The psychedelic space had its bubble 2019 to 2021. It got wild and very irresponsible. You saw hundreds of millions of dollars going into companies with no real business model, using the word psychedelic here and there, overinflating their valuations. We saw that come to a peak and then burst around November of 2021. From there, we saw the average share price drop, I think around 92%, something like that. So it was a pretty big crash. And then since then, the psychedelic space has been tough to raise in. It has been very tough to raise in because of those areas. This is a gray area market in a lot of the sectors within psychedelia. And then drug development, of course, has its own risks, particularly for early stage. So my why was really because this was a passion. This was a mission. And since then, it's just been a question of finding out everything it's going to take to continue to scale and grow this business. So it's been great. We haven't had a down year yet. We've had at least 25% year over year growth, some years much more, but it's been a mission. It has been a mission. I envy my colleagues who are, have AI startups and tech startups that are, make a lot more sense on paper.
Why does some researchers describe it as producing one of the most profound altered states of consciousness known to science?
The 5-MeO DMT, like I said before, its nickname is the God molecule. Neurologically, it has a different mechanism of action. And that mechanism of action induces a state of awareness that actually is not unique to 5-MeO DMT. The experience that we can undergo on 5-MeO, there is a name for this in every culture, in every religion, and in every spiritual tradition. And, the yogis would call it samadhi, Buddhists would call it nirvana, Christians and Catholics would call it the beatific vision. But it is a very profound experience. And with 5-MeO DMT, its method of action being quieting or shutting down the default mode network, that is, I would say, the why it is able to deliver such a huge and immense, profound experience where, not only do we generally lose awareness of our surroundings, we usually lose awareness of our body. And then sometimes we lose awareness of our sense of self altogether. And so it's just a different ballgame than any other psychedelic.
How often do you do this? How often do you do it personally? Is it something you do once a week, once a month, once a year? How does it work?
I don't do it as much as I wish I could, to be honest with you. You know, one thing with any psychedelic, but with 5-MeO, I would say in general, we don't want to do this medicine if we don't have space and time and bandwidth on the other end to be able to integrate it. You know, the neuroplasticity that is induced with 5-MeO DMT, we can inadvertently simply reinforce existing patterns and reinforce existing cognitive bias if we are not actively working in an integration process. And so, you know, now running 3 companies, I don't have a lot of time and bandwidth. I maybe get in once or twice a year with full doses, and maybe with lower doses, maybe 3 times a year, something like that. But I would say for participants coming down, that's as a facilitator. As a facilitator, it's important to maintain a relationship with the molecule, simply so we don't forget how powerful it is and what we're actually putting our participants through. But for participants who aren't necessarily in a facilitator role, we have many people that come down, do retreats at Tandava once a year or every year and a half, something like that is a nice cadence.
Do you believe consciousness is purely generated by the brain, or is something deeper occurring during these experiences? What's your opinion?
Oh man, the big old consciousness question. I would say first, I would not say consciousness is generated by the brain, but in my view, in my experience, the brain is like a radio receiver that is picking up local and non-local information from the infinite field of consciousness and creating a separate individual experience from that. And so I would say, yeah, for me, our brain is more the radio receiver that is picking up a signal that is everywhere. But also, I have no idea.
So many participants describe feelings of ego dissolution, interconnectedness, and unity. How does science attempt to measure such deeply subjective experiences?
That's the fun thing. One of our dear colleagues, James Sanders, with University College of London, has been doing some great studies around the microphenomenology of 5-MeO DMT. And he has developed a questionnaire system protocol that's used in different studies with 5-MeO and other psychedelics as well. But he was a part of one of the studies we did down here a couple of years ago with University College of London and Imperial College of London, where we did EEG scans of the full peak experience. And then immediately after their experience, they went into an interview process with him and tried to correlate timestamps of different readings on the EEG with the microphenomenology. I just got to see him last week. I think in the next month, I think some papers going to be published around that. But, you know, it is an interesting compound in terms of how that experience happens. Watching the faces on the UCL team when we did the first person and they saw the readings happening live, both of their jaws just dropped. And they were simultaneously seeing signals of deep anesthesia along with an epileptic seizure at the same time. And so if we look back at ancient scripture, so many things talk about everything and nothing at the same time. Or, you know, the ecstatic nature of consciousness being both the empty void as well as everything all at once. Things like this, we would say, could signal to a comparison. But I would say it is a big mystery in terms of how it is happening scientifically. We understand that a shutting down or quieting of the default mode network allows for expanded awareness. There's been Navy SEAL studies where, you know, they use different forms of breath work coupled with biofeedback or neurofeedback technology. And they report when they are able to lower the thinking mind, their awareness expands beyond themselves and they can get into what they feel is more of a group mind. And so we know now the more we can lower the thinking mind, the more expanded state of awareness we can get. And so if we shut the thinking mind all the way down, then perhaps awareness expands out all the way to whatever that boundless nature is.
You know, how important are preparation, setting, and integration and professional guidance in achieving positive outcomes when you're using it?
To achieving positive outcomes, I would say they're absolutely essential. To keeping people safe, they're also absolutely essential. If someone is just doing 5-MeO and not doing any prep, no integration, no real safe container, they may get a great experience. and they may feel amazing for a few weeks or a few months. Generally, that is going to fall away. I mean, neurologically speaking, around the 4-week point, the new dendritic growth will become frail and fall away. It may happen a little later, but we do know that I would say pragmatic integration processing is needed for lasting change, but also to help mitigate things like ontological shock, to help navigate different content that may be coming up from the subconscious, etc. With any psychedelic really, but with 5-MeO-DMT in particular, prep, safety, and integration are of utmost importance.
Now, can you use this in the U.S.? Is it licensed, or do you have to go to Mexico?
Not in the U.S. There are 2 companies that are currently going into phase 3 studies. We should see, if any of them make it through, market phase will be around 4 to 5 years from now, where we may see brick and mortar clinics in the U.S. We operate in Mexico, where there is a gray area here, and we are able to administer this medicine without breaking the law. Mexico, I would say, out of any country, has the lightest of gray area, and is generally the solution for people wanting to experience this medicine here, or the Netherlands, Portugal, though it's a little less shade of gray over there.
Some researchers believe psychedelics could become one of the most important mental health breakthroughs of the century. Do you agree? And could these compounds eventually be part of mainstream healthcare?
Yes and no. So in terms of psychedelics being a potential breakthrough in mental health, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. The problem right now that we're hitting up against is the difficulty getting psychedelics through clinical trials, because FDA clinical trials are meant to evaluate a drug, not a drug's efficacy when paired with therapy. And the tricky thing is, therapy is needed with these substances in order to get the effects that we're looking to achieve. And that has been a huge complication in clinical trials. We saw what happened with Lykos Therapeutics early last year with their rejection from the FDA for MDMA. Next up, we have Usona Institute and Compass Pathways that are getting ready to file their NDA packages with the FDA. And so we're going to see. I know Compass Pathways utilized minimal therapeutic intervention at best. And so this will be a little more straightforward for the FDA. Beyond that, potential risks are these drugs making it through FDA and then centers beginning and clinics beginning to utilize them, but without using therapy. We've already seen this happen with ketamine clinics. As the psychedelic boom rose, a lot of functioning clinics began offering ketamine simply as a revenue vertical. But without therapy, especially informed therapy, they're not getting any benefits. They may have a slight interruption to acute depression that lasts a few days, but essentially they're having to come back and continue to get an addictive drug and just treat it as a symptom manager rather than a therapeutic agent. And so if we can, via education, really get the message across that these drugs are powerful tools. However, therapy is a part of this whole package to really make it make sense, then we can see something go out into the world that I would say completely changes the way we look at mental health. The current mental health psychiatric system is absolutely broken, We take on participants all the time here who have been on, different medications for decades, but there's no therapeutic intervention. Their psychiatrists put them on insanely addictive and dangerous doses of benzodiazepine with no therapy in between, just numbing and suppressing symptoms rather than addressing root causes. And so I would say for psychedelics to really make it into the mainstream, this does invite, or it will require, a reorientation of how we look at modern mental health care. But that is a potential very exciting element because we don't have much to go on right now that's working greatly.
So we're coming up to the top of the show. Closing thoughts, Joel, and how do people get a hold of you?
Yeah, closing thoughts. 5-MeO-DMT is a beautiful medicine. We work with people coming from all over the world for different things. A lot of people are coming for depression or PTSD, things like this. But also, it's important that psychedelics don't all of a sudden get pigeonholed into healing. These were not traditionally used for healing. Psychedelics for healing is a relatively new paradigm, and it's a beautiful paradigm. However, remember, we work with a lot of people. We work with a lot of entrepreneurs coming down to optimize the way that they experience themselves, finding better balance in life and workflow, finding better balance in their relationships and partnerships while still maintaining full presence in their work. We work with people coming down in their own spiritual exploration, etc. But if this is something you are considering, reach out, tandavaretreats.com. Our partner company is 5 Education. Through there, you can see all the different research studies with 5-MeO, all the different information. And then our other company is 5 Discovery, where we have created non-hallucinogenic analogs of 5-MeO DMT for central nervous system disorders and are currently in the preclinical stage. But 5-MeO is an exciting compound. If you're looking to get involved, whether it's experiencing it, getting trained as a facilitator, or coming on as an investor, reach out. We're always happy to chat.
Yeah, that's great. And how do people get a hold of you? What's the best way? LinkedIn?
LinkedIn, yep. You guys have my LinkedIn. I'm active on LinkedIn. You can find me on Instagram too. It's joel.brierre, Brierre. And then, we're all over the place. So just keep in touch.
All right. Well, thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule. And thanks to all of you for joining one more time. GST presents Top Global Startups. The intersection of neuroscience, consciousness, medicine, and entrepreneurship is creating incredible possibilities that would have seemed unimaginable just a few years ago. To all of you, thanks for joining my show, Top Global Startup. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please like, subscribe, and share this episode with your network. And until the next time, stay happy, stay safe, and stay healthy. And I will be back to you again soon with another exciting edition. Thanks, Joel, and thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Gary.